The 2017 United States National Security Strategy declared that economic security is national security. That truth has never felt more urgent. In the past decade, our nation has had to contend with a pandemic, wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, and a blistering tech race with China. So here are some questions. Are we better prepared today to preserve the economic dynamism and technology advantages so essential to our prosperity? Are we better able to defend our nation against rising mercantile and malign threats? And are we out-innovating our rivals on advanced technologies such as AI, biotech, and clean technologies? To tackle these questions and more, I am profoundly honored to speak with the 25th National Security Advisor of the United States and one of our nation's foremost grand strategists, Army Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. I'm Navin Girishankar, and welcome to Betting on America. General McMaster, thank you so much for joining Betting on America. It is such a huge honor to have you, sir.
Hey, the honor's mine. I'm a big fan. Great to be with you.
Well, I want to get into the topic of economic security. You led the National Security Strategy in 2017 and really cemented the notion that economic security is national security. And for the last decade, that's all we talk about in Washington. In a sense, over the last three administrations, Trump 1, Biden, and now Trump 2, we've been in I would say, a wet clay moment with an experimentation as to what economic security policy looks like. You've written recently about economic statecraft. So I just wanted to get your sense of 10 years now, 10 years on out, how are we doing and where are we in the broad arc of U.S. economic security policy development?
Well, we're not doing well enough. We're doing a lot better than we were, mainly because we were complacent. We were overconfident, and we really had based our economic policy, our foreign policy, our defense strategy on some fundamentally flawed assumptions associated with over-optimism in the post-Cold War period, and especially, I would say, this belief that kind of an arc of history had guaranteed the primacy of our free and open societies and our free market economies over alternatives like authoritarian forms of governance or statist mercantilist economic models, the great power competition was a relic of the past, right? We're going to all cooperate, and get along well together, and then that our technological prowess, which is the topic of this awesome series you have going here, would guarantee our security well into the future, that we would be the dominant tech power, and so we vacated critical arenas of competition, and as this related to China in particular, we believe that China, as it prospered, would liberalize its economy and liberalize its form of governance. Hey, that didn't happen. Yeah. So we were behind in 2017, and we believed in 2017 we need to sprint to catch up. It's a long competition, right. But man, we need to break into a dead sprint, and we haven't broken into a dead sprint yet. And that's what I'm worried about. Is that we're taking a few steps forward, but also a couple steps back. And I know you and I will probably disagree on this a little bit. I think the relaxation, for example, of some of the export controls associated with H-20 chips, for example, I think that's a step back. I think we have to recognize that we are in competition with a hostile authoritarian power.
Yeah. And when I think about what the tools, what the constraints are, is it that we don't have the tools, that we don't have the political will, or that we're diagnosing the problem wrong? How would you weight these, or am I missing even another factor?
No, I think diagnosing the problem wrong. I think there are some people who are still clinging to this idea that just free trade in and of itself is an unmitigated good, right? Or is it unmitigated good? And that what I think that it fails to recognize the degree to which China has weaponized its statist mercantilist economic model against us.
Indeed.
With a number of unfair trade and economic practices, intellectual property theft, a sustained campaign of industrial espionage associated with that. Obviously, the whole range of subsidies that are given to companies, that result in overproduction, overcapacity, dumping on the international market, deliberate efforts to gain control of critical supply chains and to use that control for coercive purposes.
Yeah.
The forced transfer of intellectual property and technology to gain access to their market under the promise, of sustained access to the Chinese market. Hey, how's that working out?
Yeah.
Volkswagen or anybody, right? So I think we have been sort of guilty, I would say, of serial gullibility.
Yeah.
And it's time to stop it. It's past time to stop it and to recognize that. And this was the argument made in the economic statecraft piece, right? Is we don't want to become China, right?
Yes.
We don't want to become a statist model ourselves.
Right.
But what we need is protect ourselves against China's economic aggression,
right,
and incentivize our greatest competitive advantages, right? Which is our free market economic system, our innovation ecosystem, all the things that you talk about in this awesome series here.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do, and we need to compete basically.
Yeah. Well, I'm like 1,000% with you on this, General. Let me just double click on this for a second. The way I think about it, and I wanted to get your reaction to this, is that we have a peer competitor who's using mercantile and malign actions and is actually in the very global markets that we're in. And so they are ubiquitous in a sense, in a way that maybe the Soviet Union wasn't. And I'm seeking your feedback on this point. And so the question is, how do we benefit from global markets while at the same time bounding them so that we're not taken advantage of? Do we have the tools to do that?
I think we do have the tools to do it. But what we have to do, I think, is to just, of course, recognize the nature of the competition and re-enter arenas of competition that we vacated.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're,
hey,
I think we realize that if you're not on the field, you're going to get your ass kicked.
Yes.
So I think, how do we get back into these competitive spaces? And and President Trump is taking some steps in that direction in a way that in ways that I don't agree with the types of tactics. But for example, if you're concerned about China taking control of critical infrastructure associated with transportation and so forth, these are the kind of string of pearls approach that they've taken.
Right.
There are 90 airports and ports that are in critical choke points around the world, like the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
What you do is you make an argument. You say, hey, we're the United States.
Right.
We're in favor of your sovereignty.
Right.
And what you have is China using these sort of these loans, these debt traps, in a way that's a kind of a new form of colonialism. It's violating your sovereignty. So let us put together a package that'll allow you to exit from this bad deal you've got with China.
Yeah.
And have a new deal that benefits your people, and benefits your country and preserves your sovereignty.
Yeah.
That's the argument. But then when President Trump says, hey, man, we want to take over the Panama Canal. I mean, we want it back. I mean, you kind of cut the legs out of that argument. So I just think that actually what President Trump wants to do is right.
Yeah.
And then what we need to do is kind of refine how we go about it, right?
Right.
I mean, and how we counter China's economic aggression. Of course, I think what we see the administration engaged in now is kind of a renewed effort to get a big deal with China.
Right.
I mean, I'm like, hey, is this the late 90s again? Is this the Clinton administration? We know where that path is going to lead. It's going to lead to nowhere. So I think that'll play it out. And I think the Trump administration is kind of backing its way into what I think will be a sensible approach to economic statecraft. And of course, this will be an element of continuity now across 3 administrations.
Yep, you said it. And, it's interesting because you referred to the current efforts to make a deal with China. I actually am perplexed in some sense that with allies, we are exercising coercion in a way that, and leverage in a way that really undermines our ability to develop an encirclement strategy. Like if we got close with the allies, built new trade relationships, built new technology relationships, then we could deal with China. But it seems like our sequencing is off, and even our goals are off with respect to that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, amen to all that. I mean, I think I think what we should bank on is the intransigence of the Chinese Communist Party, right? Xi Jinping. I have got my faith in Xi Jinping and Chinese Communist Party, because they're going to make us realize this isn't going to work. You know, and you know what I used to say to President Trump, who I think deserves a lot of credit in his first term, right, for fundamentally shifting the approach to economic statecraft broadly, but also to the approach to the competition with China in a way that stuck. You know, the Biden administration didn't want to admit it, but they basically continued Trump one policies on China. You know, what I used to say to him is, "Hey, Mr. President, if we shoot all of our allies to get to China, China wins." You know, and so we have real sort of issues we need to resolve with Europe, for example. You know, on their economic ones in terms of regulations, the way they're going after our tech industry in a way that's kind of like rent-seeking behavior, I would say. You know, unequal access to markets. Some of the subsidies they got for certain of their industries, some of the agricultural barriers, to entry to their market. So, I mean, we got issues with them, but hey, we can resolve those. Let's work on those together.
Yeah.
But I think you're totally right about this. If the U.S., Japan, Europe, and then we bring some others in like India, who I hope we're getting, we're gonna hug again, get back into the where's the Modi hug?
Where's the the Modi bear hug? Where is it? Yeah.
So that we can compete effectively, and we're pushing out an open door. I mean, so many countries who have been subjected to China's mercantilist policies, their intimidation, their coercion, the debt trap, they want alternatives. I mean, even countries with a lot of corruption, DRC, the DRC. I mean, they want alternatives, right? So hey, this is a great moment for us if we play it right.
Well, there's so much that you've said there. Let me just linger on one point, which is the global South. You hit on that a couple of times here. I think that there's an opportunity here to define what the U.S. offer is and the U.S. technology offer is to the global South. And I think to credit to the Trump administration and its AI action plan and laying that out, I think that's phenomenal. And we should figure out what that looks like. I'm worried that we're using some arcane tools and some of the existing tools, say, for example, across the Commerce Department and XM and DFC. Those are good. There have been developments. But I wonder if we need a level of ambition and a firepower that we don't currently have to be able to do that. And I wanted to get your reaction to that.
Well, I agree, and this is one of the key aspects of this report that I did with Andy Grotto on economic statecraft, is that we need to unleash the power of private capital, private investment, with incentives. And so I'm thinking about policies like if we're concerned, should all be concerned about supply chain resilience and China's grip on critical supply chains involving critical minerals and magnets and batteries, right? I mean, hey, so what China will do, we know what their playbook is. As soon as you invest in an alternative to that supply chain, hey, they'll just dump on the international market, drive you out of business, right? Bankrupt, whoever made the investment to begin with. So, so what we got to do is maybe some insurance policies, right? And you see the Trump administration doing some of this now, with guarantees, sort of long-term purchase orders, for example, government purchase orders to incentivize private capital investment. I think that's the kind of thing we need to do, right? Because we don't want to replicate China, right? We're not going to, so the infrastructure development, finance efforts that we have in the government, they're never going to match the capital that China just pumps out, right? But I think that the Chinese model's not succeeding. I mean, I don't know what you think, but it looks like a Ponzi scheme to me. They're not getting returns on their investment, really. They're doing it for geopolitical reasons. So anyway, I think we've got an opportunity to unleash private capital.
I think it's fantastic. I was a former World Banker for a long time, and the thing that has been sort of one of my hobby horses here for pounding away at this issue, including when I was in the Commerce Department, is that we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we mobilize capital, but we're not thinking enough about the downstream and procurement. So if you look at the lion's share of international competitive bidding procurement on works for the last 20 years at the multilateral development agencies. PRC-linked companies win them. If you look at the DFC, it doesn't have a U.S. company nexus requirement. I just feel that these are gaps, General, and I wanted to get your reaction to it because this is what I mean by having a different sort of toolkit to actually achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think you're so right about this, and I hope you're getting a good audience, within the Trump administration, because I think, if you look at their agenda, right? I mean, their agenda is energy dominance, it's deregulation, it's invigorating the defense and the industrial base broadly, and it's about supply chain resilience, right? I mean, hey, sign all of us up for that program.
Yeah.
So I think anybody at this stage, because I mean, this is still an early administration. I mean, a lot of people aren't confirmed yet. I mean, a lot of the offices in commerce and other places, they're kind of empty still in terms of political appointees. So I think the insights that you have and your expertise should get a good hearing. And I'm thinking about draft legislation and executive orders that could be issued that could change our government's policies and approaches, as you mentioned. I mean, you're right. There are tremendous opportunities. You know what those are better than I do in terms of with a high degree of granularity and specificity. So I would just get them in front of the administration, please. And I think the good thing about President Trump is he's unconventional, right? He's disruptive. There's a lot that needs to be disrupted. But, unfortunately, sometimes he's so disruptive he disrupts himself, right? I mean, so I think anything we can get to the administration to say, hey, disrupt this, get this done, I think it will be tremendously beneficial.
Well, thank you for saying that, General. We're trying to make sure that we are as helpful as possible, both with the administration and people on the Hill. Let me say this. One of the other things that actually you cemented while you were there with Trump 1.0 is the notion that trade imbalances are an issue that we should be looking at. And we got to look at them. And obviously there's an orientation towards the good merchandise trade deficit, which is perhaps a bit narrow. But at least today, there's nobody who can talk economic policy without addressing the question of imbalances. And that's important. That's an important legacy. Now, here's a question. We are now in the midst of a major upheaval in global trade, driven by the United States. And it's addressing a problem, but I wonder if the solution is the right one, because the tariff gambit seems to be a little bit chaotic, and it's causing really some questions, at least in the business community, about predictability, volatility, and the investment climate. I wanted to get your reactions to that.
Yeah, well, it is. It has been very volatile. It hasn't been kind of thought out in terms of what we recommended in this paper on economic statecraft, right? I mean, have clear objectives, right?
Yeah.
And also, really provide the degree of predictability and trust that allows you to make long-term investments and that bolsters really the strength of our free market economic model.
Right.
And of course, if these big problems that we have in terms of supply chain resilience and energy security and so forth, it requires all hands on deck, right? Now you're starting to see elements of this.
Yeah.
The recent visit of the South Korean president and the joint efforts on shipbuilding, right? Or what we're doing with Finland in that connection on icebreakers, or or what we're doing, in terms of AUKUS with nuclear subs, or the various agreements we have now on minerals and access to critical minerals and mineral separation and refinement. This is all happening. It's happening. But I think what I would like to see it is we'd both probably like to see it as the top line, of this kind of cooperation. And of course, that requires a degree of trust and a degree of stability, especially in the area as we're talking about with tariffs and so forth.
Yeah.
Reciprocity. Hey, sign us up for that, right? Reciprocal.
Yeah.
President Trump will say, "Hey, that's my favorite word."
Yeah.
But those tariffs weren't about reciprocity. There's a whole bunch of other stuff layered in there.
Correct.
And if there was a clear argument that said, "Okay, hey, we have unfair trade and economic practices in the area of market access or subsidies," or you can make the argument for reciprocity and impose a tariff on that, because obviously the purpose of a trade enforcement mechanism like a tariff is to incentivize actions on the part of the other party that get you back to zero at some stage, right? Because these concerns are addressed. So Yeah, we kind of missed the boat on that. And part
Yeah.
of it is, I mean, where's the NEC? I wish we had
Yeah.
more of an NEC and an NSC. And so somebody convinced President Trump apparently that his own staff was the deep state, So like those guys got the hatchet. And now you've got, the departments and agencies, they're all doing different things, right? And you've got some White House advisors in the president's ear. And then where is the process that integrates these perspectives?
Yes, you've written about that.
President best analysis and multiple options, right? Hey, the president gets to decide these things.
Yeah.
I just hope that as the team, as I mentioned, it's still coming together, right?
Yeah.
So let's give them a little bit more time. But I hope that we'll see, and I think we're bound to see a higher degree of coherence
Yeah.
in the application of the whole range of economic tools, right? Tariffs, import and inbound and outbound investment screening,
Yes.
export controls, right? It all has to be holistic. And then also the incentives,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, to unleash the power of our free market system
Yeah.
and our unbridled entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
And then also to have a kind of a human capital strategy associated with this as well. When you hear parts of this, right?
Yes.
In terms of H-1B visas,
Right.
and ensuring that we maintain our competitive advantages in human capital.
Yeah.
That could be part of an overall strategy, right? I mean,
Brilliant.
let's get
Yeah.
it done. I mean, we're Americans, not Americans. We can do this.
I love it. I love it. You've said a lot. Right. Let me come back to the issue of how to organize our government.
I'm betting on America, man. I'm betting on America.
I love it. Yeah. Let me come back to something here. Just to finish the story on trade. I wonder if the tariff gambit, it's great in some ways, in the sense that it's opened the door to a discussion and negotiation. It's a leverage point. But there's kind of a fixation on the merchandise trade deficit. And the reality is we're a major services exporter, and we could do more if some of those non-tariff barriers in some of these countries, including our allied countries, could be removed. And so I think, like, if we thought of the trade balance in terms of both goods and services, including AI-enabled services, digital services, all that stuff that you mentioned, this would be a good way to take advantage of this negotiation that we're in right now.
Absolutely. Financial services. I mean, look at
Yes.
how China treats our banks and so forth, and then we give them access. Why the hell do we do that? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so why should we be in the United States?
Yeah.
If we don't have any kind of access. And then also the way that our tech companies are treated by Europe, right? I mean, come
Right.
on.
Exactly.
Europe is not innovating, and what they're doing is they're just taxing our companies. I mean, that's not going to work out for them. And I think that we should have a conversation, certainly with, and I'm sure we are about this. But you're right. When you bring services into the discussion, you can get, I think, more meaningful a meaningful approach. But of course, these trade agreements, we've seen these nascent trade agreements, which I guess they are really.
Right.
And Jameson Greer, man, that guy's super competent. I mean, I don't know how the heck he's doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got to be the most overworked guy, in
Yeah.
Washington, right?
Yeah.
But I think you're right. You have to look at the relationship holistically, and you've got to bring the financial aspects of it in as well. And this is one of our greatest competitive advantages, as we covered in the paper,
Yeah.
the strength of the dollar, you want to preserve that.
Yes.
President Trump has, I mean, to his credit again, right? He said, hey, you guys, if you want to create, the BRICS guys, if you want to create your own thing,
Yeah.
you're going to pay for that. And I think,
Right.
I mean, I love Brazil, man, but I can't. I'm kind of happy about the way that he's saying, hey, you can no longer, kick us, Brazil, and think you're going to get away with it, right? So there are aspects to some of these coercive measures that he's taking that I think are positive in terms of, kind of exerting American strength where
Right.
people have taken advantage, I think, of our complacency and maybe our kindness,
Right.
But we could certainly do it in a more sophisticated and productive manner, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me shift gears to technology. You touched on that issue. So I read something, I think it was in the paper that you've mentioned, where you say, and I quote you, the innovation ecosystems that produce and apply technology will prove divisive in achieving a favorable outcome. One of the things that you see with net assessments across town are comparing technological capabilities, China versus the US, snapshots of technical capabilities or market share. And every time there's a DeepSeek moment, my question is not that it happened, but why did it happen? Like, what's the underlying driver and the incentive? And I wonder, we're trying to do some work on this, on an approach to net assessment that compares ecosystems, theirs versus ours, because that'll help you know when the next shoe will drop. I'd like your thoughts on this set of issues.
Yeah, Mel, I think this is an extremely important work, right? Because, you can you see the Santa Cruz Mountains behind me here?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in the middle of Silicon Valley.
Yes.
And our ecosystem, I think, is extraordinary in terms of, the combination of academia and the ideas that we generate and the technology that's developed, along with the capital that can get behind it,
right?
And the incredible leadership and entrepreneurs, right, who put it all together and make things happen, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have tremendous advantages here.
Yeah.
But of course, the status model has advantages too.
Right.
They can just put dump a bunch of money on it and incentives, and like what you've seen happen in so many sectors within China, in terms of the industrial manufacturing capacity which they prioritized, and we can't replicate that really. Right. We can't do that, right? We can't build Shenzhen here. But we can do a lot in terms of, I think the way to think about it is how do we apply our competitive advantages in a way that puts us in front of the competition. Yeah. And a lot of that is new technologies, right? I mean, so I'm thinking about like advanced metallurgy and material science combined with advanced manufacturing, right? And additive manufacturing in particular, robotics, and then that combined with artificial intelligence technologies.
Right. Yes.
I mean, so like don't try to catch up with China on the current batteries, right, the current magnet technology. They do the next thing,
Yes.
And I think that's what we are on the cusp of doing. I see so many startups here. They haven't scaled yet, but hey, they've got proven technologies.
Yes.
Look at bioengineering. Bioengineering is like my colleague here, Drew Endy. That guy's super genius, and so is his wife, Christina Smolka, and her company. So, but there are so many examples of this where you have people who have demonstrated the strength of our entrepreneurship and our unbridled sort of free market economy. Yes. Get the barriers out of the way, right? And deregulate where deregulation makes sense, to incentivize more private capital and to remove the barriers to scaling up some of these new technologies in manufacturing. And just get out of the way, incentivize some of this, and jump ahead. I think. Look at like EM squared and small modular reactors, for example, in the area of nuclear fission. Another example, right? Hey, China and Russia, South Korea to a certain extent. I mean, they've got a lock on the current state of technology for fission, right? I mean, and they're doing a heck of a lot more manufacturing global than we are. Well. Yes. Let's not try to catch up with them on that. Let's get the next generation going here in the U.S. Export that, right? So that's the way I think about it. What do you think? I mean, I'm
with you. I feel that we've sometimes forgotten the power of markets as a driver of dynamism and innovation. I mean, I feel like that's my biggest worry. That's like the time-tested, stress-tested aspect of our ecosystem. At the same time, I think that there are some technology enablers that are not about government trying to do this themselves, but enabling private entrepreneurs to do those things. So I think of energy as an enabler. I think of the workforce issues that you talked about. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. And I also think about creative capital and the availability of capital. These are enablers for the engine of American innovation. And I think some of those require policies, but I'm deferring to you, sir, to give us your thoughts on that.
Hey, I agree with you. Yes, and so government should be a partner in enabling the free market. We have been, right? When we recognized the gravity of the tech competition in the 50s with the Sputnik launch, right? Yeah. We got the National Defense Authorization Act that put defense money in academic institutions, right? And more defense money in academic institutions. And that's a model that's worked, right? Now, we allowed too many PLA scientists to be in our Department of Defense and Department of Energy funded programs. I mean, who thought that was a good idea, right? So let's not do that. And also let's recognize there's too much overhead, in a lot of these government grants to academic institutions. There's definitely a need for reform, right?
Yeah.
Some of the research priorities are off. What I would like to see is a large language model applied to our research and development ecosystem.
Right.
So, all the military services, so many Department of Energy, Department of Defense, other departments of government, they're all funding different research. Let's get an inventory of that, right?
Yeah.
And not that we want to command direct it, because in basic research, I mean, you don't know what's going to come out. Something good's going to come out. You know what it is. You can't plan it directly. But I think it's time to kind of reassess and refocus and reform our research enterprise. But let's not kill it. We shouldn't kill it.
Yes.
Because it's important to our competitive advantage. So that's part of it as well. So everything you mentioned, I agree with. I would add the research and development enterprise.
Yes.
And there's an opportunity to kind of, I think, take it to the next level and reassess it at this point.
And in that regard, I should say that it was really encouraging to look at the AI Action Plan's goals with respect to AI's application to grand scientific challenges. It's kind of the things that you're mentioning. The incoming undersecretary to be confirmed, Dario Hill, who comes from IBM, is going to be running the national labs. And this is going to be quite interesting to see what he does there. So there's really some upside to what's happening with the administration. I wrote about their isolation versus their innovation impulse, and I think this is where their innovation impulse is really something that we should support. And I just want to sort of echo what you've said there.
Let's encourage that innovation side, right?
Yes, we got
and
to.
I'll tell you, you're doing great work on this. There's an ecosystem of in academia on this too. I'm thinking about there's a Stanford Emerging Technology Review here. There's a Technology Policy Accelerator here at Hoover. CSIS is dead in the middle of this. You've got the Special Competitive Studies Project, which I think is doing very good work on assessing these critical technology areas. So, I mean, I think we know what we need to know at this point. And it's time to just move out on it. Right?
Yeah. So let me ask one question about creative capital. I'm seeing that there's this emergence of private investors who obviously have financial goals, but they also have non-financial goals, and those are around national interest, competitiveness, and defense. And so you've written a lot about this. I've been talking to folks about this. I had Mike Brown on here, a couple months ago. Scott Nolan from General Matter. And I think of these folks as patriot investors. They have priced in the non-financial national interest goals, but they're using their capabilities as great investors to pursue really difficult challenges. Do you see this as catching on, or are these like, one or two heroes that are doing this?
It's catching on. It's great. I love it. Right. So when I got out here in 2018, there was still like the post-Snowden hangover, right? There was all this moral equivalence, the kind of what I would call like the soft-headed, cosmopolitanism, where everyone would be a global citizen. I'm like, okay, all right, man. Hey, there's some real competitions going on. And I want to like send Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin chocolates and flowers and say thank you so much, for clarifying the nature of the competition. And so people suddenly realized, hey, there is real badness in the world, and for all of our flaws, we're pretty good. We're a democracy. We have a say in how we're governed. We have rule of law. We have due process of law. We have freedom of speech and assembly, right? I mean, hey, we have these tremendous advantages, and we've been born into, or we have come to this country. Let's appreciate, let's celebrate the freedoms we enjoy, be proud of it, but also recognize we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to protect our freedom, right? And to recognize that there is this kind of axis of authoritarians or aggressors who are acting against our interests. And I give credit to a lot of the venture capital leaders out here, who realized this early and said, hey man, I'm gonna be an American and be be unabashed about it, right? And
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, I'm thinking about, like the American Dynamism,
Oh, right,
fund,
right.
and I'm thinking about, I mean, companies like Andrew, right? I mean, Palmer Luckey, man, how cool is that, man?
Yeah,
A guy in flip flops and board shorts, man, and a Hawaiian shirt, who says, man, I'm gonna apply my talent to national defense, right?
right.
Palantir's in this category, but there's so many others that I mean, too many to mention, of startups who are innovating, who see the need, right,
Yeah,
and are putting their these are venture capitalists putting their money behind it, entrepreneurs who are applying their talent to it, scientists and researchers who are working on these tough problems, and they don't have to hide it anymore. It
yeah,
used to be uncool, like
right.
to work on defense and national security. Now
Yeah.
it's hip. It's hip.
Yeah, this is like a fascinating area. I'm so glad you're shining a light on it because if the next generation of investors legitimately can bring their great capabilities as investors married to national goals, we can go quite far in this country, given the system that we have.
And you had Mike Brown on, right? He's at the
Yeah,
forefront, right? With it's Shield Capital's one of the many who are doing this.
yeah,
Harpoon. There's like a whole bunch of them, and the key thing is, and this is what I've heard from a lot of these venture capital leaders. We got to see it pay off, right? They've got to see their
right,
a path to revenue, and so
right,
the government's got to get better, right,
right. Yes,
at doing business with these smaller firms,
yeah,
and I see that starting to happen. It's starting to happen. I hope it
yeah,
continues. You've got great leadership in the Department of Defense. I mean, Steve Feinberg, man, that guy he knows
yes,
what's to happen,
yeah,
And so and he's from the outside, right? We
mm-hmm,
kept scratching our heads like, nah, why isn't defense procurement being reformed? And the same people keep rotating in the Department of Defense. You're like, well, maybe that's got something to do with it,
yeah,
So
yeah,
now you've got a new leader in there in that really critical deputy position, who I think knows what needs to happen. So hey, I'm pretty optimistic about it, and there's support in Congress for all this, and it's one of the few bipartisan things people agree with, right? And
yeah,
who's against innovation? Like, who's going to raise
yes.
their hand on that, right? So I think we've got some real potential here.
Let me shift back to how we organize ourselves in government to be able to address these big national challenges. You've written about this in the Statecraft paper. You've talked about this for many years, obviously having been at the helm of this. You touched on it a little bit earlier in this conversation. What should we be doing at the apex and center of government, whether it's NEC or NSC, and how the interagency works? Because having spent some time myself, it just feels slow. We're spending more time coordinating. If I hear the word coordination one more time, it's just like, my gosh, it's like smacking your head against the wall again and again and again. What do we do about that?
Okay, well, this is going to sound kind of general to you, but hey, you already alluded to it. It's got to be purpose driven, right? I mean,
Mm,
so the first thing is you've got to come to an understanding of the nature of the problem. That's what we try. That's what Andy Grotto and I did in the
yeah,
paper. And what's the
yeah,
problem they're trying to solve here? And then based on that, you have to establish clear goals and objectives.
mm-hmm,
And then subject them to scrutiny. Make sure everybody buys into it. Hey, does everybody agree? This is the nature of the problem. These are the goals and objectives. Okay, this I know sounds very basic, but then what you have to do is you have to identify the assumptions on which your effort is going to be based, right?
yeah,
And you have to then identify the obstacles to progress. What's impeding you? Why don't we have the level of innovation? Why don't we have the ability to take advantage of our competitive advantages of free market economic system the way that we want to?
yeah,
Why don't we have the resilience in the supply chains that we want? Why don't we have the industrial capacity to make things, damn it, that we need to make, in this country? And so identify the obstacles to progress and the opportunities that you can exploit. And then you have to ask the question of people who come to the table with interdisciplinary perspectives. I think you need to have
yes,
private sector people at the table here,
yeah,
because you need their expertise, and you need the private sector to be a big part of it, and ask the payoff question.
yeah,
How do we overcome the obstacles of progress? How do we take advantage of the opportunities? And how do we begin to achieve our objectives?
Right.
That's your strategy. That's your strategy, right? And
Yes.
and then you have to have, as you already alluded to, you have to have measures of effectiveness, right? You know, measures of effectiveness to and say, and then come back to it, you know, every 6 months or whenever. Hey, are we achieving what we wanted to achieve? If not, why not? You know, and then part of this too is examining why we failed in the past. And I'm a historian, right? So kind of predictable I would say this. You know, we've been talking about supply chain resilience since the 1970s, at least, right?
Yeah.
You know, we've been talking about the atrophy in our shipbuilding capacity since the 1970s, 80s. You know, why the hell didn't we do anything about it in the past? Some people tried, I think, right? But they failed. Why did they fail? Because what we don't want to do is to kind of adhere to, you know, the definition of insanity attributed to Einstein, right? Is you know, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Right. Right. General, you have such a deep and perspective on these things. I got to ask you, the Betting on America agenda is not just about technology. It's not just about economics. Ultimately, it's about the resourcefulness of our people and our ability to work together. And I think it pains me that we are in extremely polarized times. When you talk to people, some of them in the Trump administration, some of them in the Biden administration, some outside of government, there are like some really brilliant, capable people of all stripes. And somehow we're not able to get together because we're, you know, really polarized and throwing mud at each other and so on and so forth. What's your thought on this? What's the answer? How do we find a path forward?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's got to be leadership, right? And you need leaders to get to the politics of addition who want to bring more people into the tent instead of doubling down, like on a narrow political base. And you see this on the far left or the far right, whatever you know. Actually, the far left and far right, they kind of seem to agree with each other.
Yes,
man.
yes.
I mean, you know, I mean, it's crazy. So hey, let's just have a conversation about, you know, what we can agree on at the beginning, at the outset, right? Do we agree that we want a better future for our children and grandchildren? I think we can agree on that.
Yeah.
Can we agree that to do that, we need to emphasize, you know, maybe reforms in education? We need to unleash the power, you know, of our free market economy through deregulation. We're going to need, heck, man. I mean, you know, if we have a movement toward wanting to make more in this country, and we want to win the AI race, man, we better have a hell of a lot more power, man. Let's agree on that. We need to have a hell of a lot more power, and we want clean, reliable power. Let's figure that out, man. I mean, there's so much we could do, right? That is not partisan. These aren't partisan agendas, right? I mean, so let's get after it, you know, and I think just beginning conversations with what we can agree on, you know, and stop trying to score partisan points with everything, you know. I think that would bring a lot of people into the tent. I mean, what we're seeing, I think, you know, this is not my area, but you know, I would defer to the political scientists here, you know, in both of our organizations, the CSIS and Hoover, to tell us more about this. But what's happened is the tents of the political parties have shrunk. Right. And we know this is happening. Mo Fiorina, a great political scientist, he's writing a book about this, and he's done great work on it already. And what's happened is the big tents of the Republican the Democrat parties have shrunk. You know, and it's left a lot of us like outside both the tents. We're like, hey, you know, where's my tent, man? You know, and so, you know, I think there's got to be some reform in that connection to bring more people in and to, you know, to emphasize really what we want to achieve. And there's still a lot of bipartisan leaders, you know, but they get drowned out, you know, because of the people on the extremes. They're really good at social media, right? They're really good at being super loud, and they're kind of mean. I think they're mean people, you know. So let's be less mean, you know, and nicer to each other. And talk about like what we can agree on. How about that?
I love it. I love it. And then, you know, I'm a fan of Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I think it was in Self-Reliance that he said, do the thing and you will have the power. And I think if we just pick a few things and we do them, we will have the power. And then we could just keep compounding on that. And, you know, these are just some like timeless and universal truths. But you don't understand how much of an honor it has been to have this conversation with you, sir.
Oh, no, hey, the honor's mine, because, you know, I'm betting on America, man. You know,
I love it.
And we need more positive voices like yours. So what a privilege to be with you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for joining this thought-provoking conversation with former National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster. You can find this episode of Betting on America and more on CSIS.org, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is Navin Girishankar reminding you that everyone has a role to play in the tech race.